Hi, I'm Vicki Claiborne with High End Systems, and I'm going to show you how to program a whole hog 2 console. The Hog is a great console for concerts and television and theater, as well as clubs and other things. And with a little bit of practice, you can master the basics of programming. So now, let's move on to the first section, Hardware Overview. All right, we're going to start by talking about the hardware overview. We're going to start with the front panel, talk about the rear panel. We're going to go over the touch screens, going to talk about the battery life. We're also going to show you how to hook up a keyboard as well as a mouse or a trackball if you prefer to use those accessories. Starting with the front panel of the whole hog console, there are 2 touch screens. Below the touch screens are 3 fixture encoder wheels. We use those to vary things from color to gobos, pan and tilt, that sort of thing. There's a programming section below that with editing buttons, buttons like copy, move, delete, undo, active load, update, and record. There are cue editing buttons including macro, page, cue, list, the pig key, which was a very important key to know where it's at, the setup key, the time button, and the set button as well. To the right of the editing section, you have a keypad. The keypad is where we do all of our data entry, fixture selections, backspace key, the enter button. Above that, we have the group, focus, color, and beam buttons, which indicate to the wheels which mode that they're in. Other cue editing buttons include tri-cue, highlight, blind, and clear, and we'll be showing you how to use all of these buttons as we get to those sections. On the left-hand side of the whole hog console is a playback section. Each one of these controls an independent cue list. Each cue list has its own play button and pause button, as well as fader and bump button. The choose button located right above the fader. There is a large play button and a large pause button. These are the central controls, and depending on which cue list is the chosen cue list, which we will discuss later, the chosen one is the one that the large button controls. Here's the release button. That's very important. It has to do with releasing a cue list from being active on stage, as well as a skip forward and a skip back cue button so that you can go backwards a cue or forwards a cue without the crossfade time being a factor. There's also a go-to button that allows you to jump from one cue to another cue way down in the cue list or backwards in the cue list without having to go through each cue in between. Important buttons to know on the whole hog console are the pig key as well as the set key. And I'm going to tell you how to use those 2 keys and how we use those keys in different windows as we go along. But generally, anytime that you need to use a shift function, we will use the pig key. The pig key by itself doesn't actually have any function, but in conjunction with things like pig page, pig copy, pig active, those are pig functions, and we will use those quite a bit. They do various things depending on the windows that you're in. Also, the set key, anytime that we actually need to type in a name in a window or an actual numeric value or change a path setting and those sorts of things, we actually use the set key to do that. We will press the set key, then type in the value on a keyboard or on the keypad, and then press enter to enter that value. So those 2 buttons are very important to know where they're located, because you will use the pig key and the set key quite often as you're programming. The rear panel of the console has 4 DMX outputs. They are labeled output 1, output 2, output 3, and output 4. Each output has 512 channels of DMX that are available. So the total number of channels for a whole hog, unless you're using an overdrive box, would be 2,048. There are also 2 monitor ports on the back of the whole hog that allow you to hook 2 external monitors into the console. In addition to the 2 touchscreens that are actually on the face of the console. On the back of the console, there's also a keyboard port as well as a mouse port and a printer port. the Hog console itself does not actually store the show in its memory. It has only RAM memory inside. If you want to make a backup copy of your show, it must be stored to a floppy disk. So you must make sure you know where the floppy disk drive is located. The DMX in port next to the floppy disk is very important if you plan to use an external console to allow you to do things like have DMX submasters, give you additional access to cue lists if you're not using an expansion wing, and a variety of other things. There are 3 MIDI ports on the back of the whole hog labeled in, through, and out, as well as a timecode port which is used for show control. Also on the back of the console is a large blue button encased in a plastic flip lid. This is the reset button for the console. This button, when you press it, actually removes the show from memory in the console. So that is why it's protected by the plastic lid, so that you don't accidentally go and clear out your show from memory. You will also find the desk light port on the back of the console, and just a word of advice to you is that you cannot adjust the level of the desk light. When you plug it in, that's the level it will be at. On the back of the console is also an expansion wing port, which allows you to hook up an expansion wing that increases your number of playbacks to 42 total independent cue list controls. You can also hook up the Hog remote to the expansion wing as well. As I mentioned before, the Hog does not actually store the show in memory. Therefore, it's important that as you go along, you're backing your show up to a floppy disk.
High-end systems.